Welcome to the Rhythm Changes podcast. I am your host, Chris Fraser. Thank you for joining me. Today's guest on the podcast is a wonderful, brilliant keyboard player, composer, arranger, as well as a software engineer, originally from Kent, England. It's Nick Peck. You may know him from groups like Thunder Lizard here in town. I got to play with him a couple of years ago when he still lived in Vancouver. He now lives on the island. We talk about that a little bit. He came to town to play with Len Aruliah's group at Frankie's. I always have had such great in-depth conversations with Nick whenever we were able to hang out with each other. First meeting at the jam session at Pat's Pub. So this was a real treat just to sort of hang out with him again. And we end up talking about pop music, like what direction pop music is going in, and the rise of AI in music and in everything else, in art in general. Fascinating to talk with Nick at any time. So please enjoy our conversation. How was the drive in? Or you took the bus from Horseshoe?
I took the bus, yeah. I got a lift down to Horseshoe Bay, and Departure Bay, and then got to the ferry over, and I grabbed the bus. And actually, it wasn't bad. It was just we had a bit of a wait for the bus, but that being said, it was
there's
nice, smooth trip.
I mean, there's traffic every day during the day now in Vancouver, especially coming from North Vancouver or anything like that, just any part of the North Shore. It's are you living in Nanaimo?
Not quite. I'm living just north of Parksville, between Parksville and Qualicum.
Okay, yeah.
It's French Creek, but
French Creek.
Yeah, it's all sort of slowly merging into one.
That's a really nice area.
Yeah, it's nice. I like it. I like the quiet. And yeah, I mean, it's a nice place to live for me. Yeah.
Do you get out to the water a lot?
Now and again, yeah. Actually, I haven't been down to the beach at all this summer, but it's something I like to do in the winter. I like to go for long walks along the beach.
Yeah.
But if it's in the summer, I do like to swim a lot. I usually go somewhere inland and do some swimming in one of the rivers.
Yeah.
I'm really into that.
Or a lake. There's a, I think it's like Honeymoon Lake or something like that nearby.
Oh, right. I don't know of that one. No.
What do they call it? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. What a nice area. How long have you lived there now? When did you move out to the island?
I think 5 years and 1 month, I think.
Wow.
I sort of actually ended up getting caught there during COVID.
During the pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, I remember going over to do some gigs, and the week before, I remember playing with my friend Nick Hempton at Frankie's, and Nick had just come from New York City, and he was saying, "Oh man, it's so nice to see people out." He said, "In New York City at the moment, everything's starting to get closed down." Of course, we didn't know what was about to hit us, and so I got off in the car and went to the island the next day to play some gigs, and little did I know, actually, I ended up being stuck there for some time.
Yeah,
it was all my everything I have been coming back to Vancouver for.
Yeah,
slowly got cancelled bit by bit. So
I
just figured, I'll just keep on hanging here, and
Well, and your folks live out on the island.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
How long have they been there?
Have
they been in Canada longer than you have?
Oh yeah.
I
think about 18 years. Yeah,
okay,
something like that.
And you moved out here in 2013?
Yeah, that's right.
Vancouver. Yeah, I remember because we met going to the Pat's Jam, or maybe even at the Goldies Jam.
I never actually made it to the Goldies Jam. Okay. No, but I remember that was just in its last year.
Yeah.
David Blake was doing that, wasn't he? And I think I would have probably met you at the Pat's Jam.
Yeah, it would have been Pat's Pub then. Yeah, that was that was a great time for me. Because I think, 2013, I was still in school. I finished at Capilano in 2014. And so that's, I think, the time where I had just moved to Vancouver because I had grown up in Surrey, and I was living in Surrey until 2012, going to school. And so I moved to the city in 2012. And so like around that time, I was going to jam sessions and meeting people there. And so like that was just like my life was like school, and then jam sessions on Mondays.
Great.
And so that's where I met so many like important people in my life, honestly, going to those jam sessions. Was that like something you were thinking of when you moved here? Because did you move here for work?
No. I just moved here out of my own choice. I was lucky in the time I had a day job. I was working as a programmer, and that was for a company in England. And they kindly allowed me to start working remotely. And this was, over a decade before anyone was talking about remote work.
Yeah.
So that was very nice of them. And so I was able to take that work with me when I came here. And
so is it something you had on your mind for a while, moving out here?
Yeah. It had always been gnawing away at me.
Yeah.
during my time in the UK. Part of my family roots are from England, the other half are from Quebec. So we've been spending a lot of time in Quebec as kids. So I knew that side of the country very well. And I had, in the years beforehand, been making several trips across Canada, just checking everything out. I'd been spending time in Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver and Vancouver Island. And it was really nice reconnecting with the West Coast, because my only memories of that were of a trip that we made when I was probably about 3 or 4 years old.
Okay.
And my dad was a meticulous person for taking photographs and making slides out of them, and later on home videos when that became a thing. So we had some beautiful slides we took of this trip. This was the very early 80s, and everything that was made it, the photography of that time, beautiful, vivid colors.
Yeah.
I just remember that we periodically, my dad would play those slides once every couple of years. We'd put the projector out, and I'd see all these slides of the West Coast and relive that trip when I was a toddler. So,
what kind of camera did he have?
Oh, I can't remember, but this would have obviously been in the days of proper film. It was always something that was on my mind.
Yeah. So did you do like everything there was to do? I know like people like Stanley Park was like a big draw for people in Vancouver, like back in the day. I mean, obviously it still is, but I feel like it's not as big. I don't know. I feel like it's not the main tourist attraction that I feel like it was like in the 20th century. But okay, so you had this trip here, and you were like, man, like what a cool place. But also so you have Quebecois family.
Yeah.
Do you speak French?
Not very well.
Okay.
I could probably do it with practice. And apparently my mum said I spoke French before I spoke English.
Really? Wow.
It's interesting as infants how we can pick up on things. So
totally, yeah.
I know, because I've seen some of the books I would have been looking at that time, and I was probably able to understand quite a bit of French. Yeah. But it's just the circumstances that you're in. I'm sure if I was living there, or if I was living in France or a French-speaking country, I'd probably be able to get back into it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I feel like you're the kind of person that like actually speaks 5 languages and no one realizes.
No, I've never really
because I think of you as like kind of like this polymath kind of person, where you because I mean, every time I talk to you, you're talking about writing for a new instrument or something like that. You play piano and B3 organ, but you're also, last time we were talking, you were talking about writing for guitar.
Yeah. I really got into that during the pandemic. I'd been toying with it for some time, but I think that period of being isolated from a lot of what was going on around me, and there was almost a sense at that time, I found it really difficult to actually play piano or Hammond at home, just because my perceptions of playing those instruments up to that time had always been in a room with people. And taking those people out of the equation, I suddenly found it quite difficult to play. That those instruments had such a connection for me of actually something you were doing and getting a reaction from people, especially the organ, because it's so drenched in blues and soul, and however hard you try to escape it, there's always that colour that it it forces you to play in a very extrovert way, or at least for me.
Sure.
And suddenly I found I couldn't play them because it just reminded me of a world that didn't seem to be happening at the moment.
Wow,
but somehow as fate would have it, I stumbled across some Ralph Towner, and that sort of got me thinking about the acoustic guitar.
Right.
And I started practicing that all the time. I think there was a period I didn't touch the piano for about four or 5 months.
Wow. So as somebody who can play both, I mean, I can fake on the piano, enough to get me my bachelor's degree. That's about it. But for you, having written on for the guitar and obviously for the keyboard, what would you say are like the main differences in the limits of those instruments?
Right. That's an interesting question, actually.
Because that's always what you're dealing with when it comes to writing and arrangements, right? Is understanding the limits.
I tend not to think too much about the limits of things. I think it's more about what it wants you to do. An interesting thing about Ralph Towner's approach to the guitar, which to me is thousands of levels above what I would ever be able to achieve. But he was actually a piano player to begin with, a piano and trumpet player. And if you look at some of the things he's published about his guitar technique, he does emphasize independent control of starting and stopping the strings, almost like his fingers are the piano hammers. So in a way, that kind of lineage of the guitar, to me, has a connection to the piano, which is how do you voice something so it gives the perception of a bass line, maybe some harmony in the middle and the melody at the top. That's quite tricky.
That's a good
I've
way of
only
thinking of the guitar,
I could only claim to have scratched the surface on that.
Totally. It is. The more I play the guitar, the more I realize how deep of an instrument it is.
Yeah.
And I've played guitar for 23 years, and it's still like if I'm inspired enough, I will accidentally play a chord I've never played on the guitar. And it seems like the kind of instrument where you could exhaust the number of chords you could play pretty quickly. But I also, there's probably a bunch of reasons for that. But yeah, like I also had to start learning classical guitar because I had a classical student. Like I'd picked up a roster of students from somebody that had retired. Yeah. And so one of their longtime students was learning classical guitar or relearning classical guitar. Because she had taken classical guitar lessons as a child and then quit and then had a whole career and then decided to get back into guitar again. So we were sort of learning classical guitar together almost.
Oh, that's great.
And the approach to the guitar from the perspective of someone like Fernando Soar is so, I think it's so invaluable because you really are looking at the guitar in a different way. But it's also so optimized too, because I think from the jazz perspective, I know it's probably different for keyboard because I know a lot of piano players study classical pieces for piano because technique is so important. And at least in the jazz world, technique on guitar is important, but not from a classical perspective because
I think after many years I've come to the conclusion the same might be true with the piano.
Okay.
I wouldn't advocate anybody to go and study classical music for the technical side, although I'd certainly advise anybody to go and broaden their horizons by looking at how people approach that and talking to the people who really think about how to get different tones and how to use the hand and the wrist effectively. There's a lot of different combinations. I'd love to take a video of McCoy Tyner playing and go to one of these great teachers of classical piano technique. I think I figured it out after many years. There's a very particular finger action, and it's it's kind of a combination of many things coming together. He's one of my inspirations. That's certainly one set of tone colors and technical approaches you can take. But I think there's many things. What I'd advise people to do is just to study as many different, or look at as many different ways the piano has been used.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing a lot of solo piano, just to find how over the 500 years of keyboards and keyboard writing, how people have approached this problem of making the keyboards convey multiple, bass, harmony, melody, or complete different kinds of textures. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think the guitarists, I think, have a perception of the piano where it's this sort of like infinitely more, there's like way more potential for different things that you can do with the piano, because you can, you can ostensibly play with like 10 plus plus keys at once.
Or your whole elbow.
Yeah, exactly. And so like guitar players are jealous of that kind of thing. But I also find that piano players tend to have this this thing about guitar too, where it's almost like I don't know, there's a thing about like being able to like cover the amount of ground that you can with the guitar like as easily as you can, right? Because it's a different thing, and but the other thing I realized as I've learned this music is guitar voicings and piano voicings often are the same thing.
Yeah, I think they are a lot of the time.
Like I'm sure like we've played together and we're playing the exact same like G13 stock grip, because that's just what sounds good no matter what. Like it just sounds good in that range. That specific combination of like an F, a B, and an E kind of thing. Yeah, is just gonna sound good on the guitar or on the piano. Yeah, and so it's actually not so different, because we're still like playing within the canon, right? Like there's I only learned recently about how the piano players have like these stock voicings, and that's been really kind of eye-opening for me, because that's also what guitar players have, right? Like,
I think we'll start with those.
Yeah.
I suppose. Okay, here's one way the piano could go further. Although maybe that just might be because I've got a lot more experience on keyboards, but there are ways to get outside of those stock voicings, of course, within the context of the same kind of music. So. I think maybe that's one way you could say the piano. It's easier to sort of find your way into things outside the stock voicings. Although the guitar does have some possibilities, especially when you look at the folk traditions and how open strings are blended, or partial bar chords are blended with open strings to create quite interesting suspensions there.
Yeah. Brad Meldau talks about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually influenced his piano playing quite a lot.
For sure, yeah. He loves those drone notes in like the middle of what he's doing. Yeah. Which is very guitar-y, right? When you listen to him playing like Blackbird, which is the perfect example of that. Like he's always keeping that middle G playing and just doing everything else around it. Which is, I mean, like I remember, playing guitar for the first time as a kid, and like figuring out how to play thirds on the I'm thinking of this like first guitar I ever played, and it's like this like kind of like parlor sized guitar that had the E string missing, and I just never replaced it. So it was a 5-string guitar. And I remember just like plucking the D string and then figuring out notes on the G and B strings that sounded good. And like
you found the third in it.
And like, and just like having that D pedal, and like I was like, I figured out how to write music. Yeah, and that's just the most natural sounding thing on the guitar is to have one of those open strings be a pedal and then play something around that.
Yeah,
And
I suppose I should offer a disclaimer on this whole subject in that the way I sort of figured out the guitar was sort of using fingers, not a plectrum, so having multiple fingers, which seemed natural to me as a piano player. It does create the disadvantage that you do have to have nails, and unfortunately with nails, and at least most of the way I would play the piano, I quickly found out didn't sort of work very well.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it just took one gig where I had to play the piano loud and the nails shattered. So that sort of kind of put an end to that the sort of line of exploration for me. I do pick it up now and again and maybe play it hard for a couple of months, but I was starting to find the two aren't a good combination.
With the fleshy tone. You just gotta stick with the fleshy tone.
Well, apparently that was the way. I think prior to Saw, I believe in the Renaissance, I believe it was expected that you would play with the flesh of the fingers rather than the nail. So that's interesting. The use of nails is more of a contemporary development in the classical guitar.
Right.
And I gather some people have started going back to using the flesh of the fingers. It creates a very beautiful, almost harp-like quality if you can get that sound, and you've got a good guitar. And it's very melancholy. I can see why Ralph Towner would have liked it as an admirer of Bill Evans, as I am too. There's a sense of melancholy you can instantly achieve with playing a melody on the nylon guitar that requires a lot more work to do on the piano.
Interesting, yeah. I think it is, the guitar does have a couple of those things that are a lot harder to achieve on the piano, like the way that you can do a glissando without it being comical.
Well, oddly enough, I think we were listening to some Pat Coleman the other night. We were driving home from a gig, and I had this particular glissando thing that Pat would always do. And, there's a way to do it on the guitar. It's not the same effect.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm sure you could do like a very soft, very even glissando on the piano with some practice, of course. But I feel like it takes a lot more work probably to get that to sound like as casual as it does on the guitar, I guess. Yeah. Or like there isn't a lot of bending, but things like just like those articulation choices that you can make, like sliding in or hammering on kind of things, like, different flavors. I like to call them like primary and secondary articulations.
Okay.
But I want to know about how. Okay, so like when did you start playing piano?
When did I start playing piano?
Yeah. Like how young were you when you?
Did
you have a piano in the house?
Yeah, we did actually. It's an interesting story. There was a grand piano in the house. I think it was an 1890 Broadwood piano. So that's quite an old make of piano, relatively speaking. Looking back on it, actually, the body was it. I remember the shape of this, and it was quite different from how the style of the piano body evolved in the decades after that. But at that time, the piano was in the house, and from now and again, I'd just go and improvise on it. It probably sounded like a really bad version of Cecil Taylor. I hadn't heard jazz at this point. I was just an infant, and I just played around. I found there were different things you could do and different effects you could make, and I think I started having piano lessons when I was about 6 or 7.
So you were able to do a Cecil Taylor like improvisation anything you wanted in the house, and no one said that's enough.
It was a fairly big house, but
okay, that's good. That's good.
I think my parents are very understanding there. I do remember playing that for my uncle once.
I'm sure
they about 4 years old, and I said, "I'll put that on a tape for you," and he said, "No, thanks."
I'm sure they. I'm sure your parents saw you approaching the piano and they're like, okay, don't do anything. Just let him go. All right?
Well, I thought that's how music was made. I didn't realize. I just thought. I mean, we listened to music, but didn't have a huge. It wasn't a big part of making music. Wasn't really a thing that we did in the family at that point.
Did you go to church?
No. But we had music at school all the time. So yeah, that was kind of a normal thing to do, orchestras and choirs and such like. So,
what about listening to music in the house?
We did, but we didn't really listen to jazz when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But lots of other interesting things, actually. I think looking back on what my mum and dad would be very interesting rock and pop and prog rock.
Yeah.
Things like Mike Oldfield's.
It's like the late 70s?
This would
Early
be
80s?
the early 80s.
Early 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember things like Mike Oldfield or the Electric Light Orchestra, the Beach Boys.
So you're
Pink
okay.
Floyd.
Well, you get the Beach Boys early on. You're learning voice leading.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that
great,
is
great vocal writing.
yeah. That's cool. And so you start out with an understanding of music being improvised, like as far as like how it's written, right? So
Yeah.
how are you able to like? Is that you start taking lessons? And then
I wasn't a very good student.
Right.
To just make that clear, I was terrible.
Yeah.
In fact, I stopped after about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
I just didn't. Nothing had
Were you
really
doing
grabbed
Royal
me.
Conservatory stuff?
Yeah, they're called the Associated Board in England, but I think it's all the same thing. I think it's under the same umbrella organisation. But I think I liked it. I certainly loved the music, but I did find it challenging.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed playing the pieces, but it took me a long time to learn. I couldn't read very well.
Right.
And, I'm trying to think back to that time, but I stopped for a period. And it didn't really grab me. Somehow along the lines, I just started picking things out off the radio, or I figured by accident this thing called the 12-bar blues. I didn't realize it was a 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I just copied the music from a video game.
Wow, really?
And if you remember video games at that time, you probably had an 8-bit sound card and could play one note at once. So that was pretty primitive.
Yeah.
Nothing like video game music became later on.
Well, I find a lot of that earlier video game music is very jazz influenced. There's lots of jazz harmony in a lot of that stuff. Like I remember hearing like when I heard, what is that John Scofield record, Blue Matter from the mid 80s. And there's this one track called Trim, and it's got like Dennis Chambers on drums and everything. It's like this super like super 80s jazz.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this sounds like a racing video game, but this is before a racing video game. So those guys were listening to this. Like whoever made the music for those video games that I'm familiar with were listening to this music. And then like, the more you like see that pattern, the more you realize like, oh, all of the music, because they're all nerds. The only people making video games back then were huge nerds. And I mean, like, they're nerds still, but it's a huge, huge industry. So.
It was very challenging. I remember programming back then as a kid, and this would have been on, I think, would have been Amstrad PCW and learning BASIC on that.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, looking back on it now, there was no internet. The only way you learnt to program was by buying magazines that came out every month. And you had to copy
or
the
go to
program.
the library.
You had to copy the program into the computer line by line from the magazine.
Wow.
Or sometimes they even gave it to you in a block of hexadecimal. I remember this once, and my dad entered it, and we spent the whole night. I sat there with a ruler as a kid, and I read out the numbers one by one. And he entered them, and I can't remember what they did, if it made a picture of something, but that was how we learnt to program.
Wow.
And, very very mini steps.
So you've been into it for a long time then, into
On and off, yeah. But I was definitely
part of your life.
using computers at that time, and it was a very different experience to what we have now. I feel, looking back on it now, that we were always in control as computer users now, and now it's one of the issues facing us as users of technology is we are often not in control of that technology as the consumers of that technology. So it can be quite, it's quite on for me now. I don't actually use a smartphone to this day. I find things where I'm not in control of the technology a little bit challenging. When the software tries to do things, tries to be too clever and tries to preemptively decide what I'm trying to do. I find that quite frustrating to work with.
That's funny because I feel like, there's been a long history of there being a fantasy about having computers do things for us and automate tasks that are considered menial tasks or whatever. And now a lot of those things have become automated, especially since the time of the smartphone. Like so many things can be automated now. But it's probably getting to a point where it's a little too much.
Yeah.
If we start talking about AI and LLM technology or anything like that.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah,
I have an interesting background here. I actually did my master's on paper on AI, although probably there's I don't know how much you want to get into this, but there are. I think one could make a distinction, even though things based on neural networks were being discussed and being talked about and have been talked about for some decades.
Yeah.
Back then, there was more of an emphasis on what I suppose might be called the classical techniques of artificial. Well, I don't want to use the term AI, but it's actually machine learning. But these are processes that are generally using algorithms and that are more easy to sort of reason about. I was very interested in the American composer David Cope, who had started in the 80s using various software programs to analyze existing music and extract the I think he called them the signatures from those music. So he'd look at some Brahms or some Mahler or something, and the program would analyze it and find the common chord progressions, the common melodic things, and the common structural things. And armed with these tools, he was able to put this together and create quite convincing music. This was, I think, he started doing this in the 80s. So there's nothing new. Maybe we're trying different techniques now, and maybe we're finding that some of those techniques are actually not all they're cracked up to be.
Right.
That's a long discussion.
I feel like you're a good person to talk to about this, though, because it is it's a thing that's happening right now. I mean, have you seen these programs that are like making music, like Suno? It's all based on LLM technology.
Yeah, I'm aware of them. Actually, one thing is I've kind of tuned out a lot of what's going on.
Good for you.
But I do sort of dip into it now and again. And, well, first of all, my decision to make music using the largely more traditional means is I don't feel I have to qualify that my decision to do that. That's I find almost that to some extent the decision of how people use or don't use technology is almost so deeply held that it's almost maybe a spiritual viewpoint. So I feel the only thing is that it's not my responsibility to challenge anybody who wants to do that. And I hope, likewise, nobody should challenge my decision to keep making music with a pen and paper.
Yeah.
Although I'm not against using technology. I think my perception overall is that, as with any new tool that comes out, people feel they have to apply it to everything.
Yes.
And I think time eventually shows that there are good places to use this, places where it's very effective and places where it's not so effective.
Right.
And the analogy I might make is, well, if you look at science fiction in the 50s, suddenly everything had to have a nuclear reactor in it.
Right.
You know, the Jetsons had a nuclear reactor. Brains in Thunderbirds was using a nuclear reactor to power the kitchen oven in the Tracy's island home. And we eventually, as time went on, it was discovered that probably wasn't a technology that could be used in. In fact, it was dangerous in ways that perhaps weren't well known now. And perhaps the best place now that we have a nuclear reactor is 20 miles away from where anybody lives at all.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing might apply with at the moment we're trying to see,
it's
what can we apply LLMs to?
It's early days.
It's early days, yeah.
And people are, exactly. There's going to be sort of a cultural craze about it because of the potential of it.
Yeah.
But there's a huge difference between the potential of something and the ultimate utilization and adoption of said technology.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I feel like it's not necessarily a fad, because it's like it is a thing. There are applications of this technology that have been genuinely useful, like in research and in medicine and stuff. Like, people have been using LLMs for over 10 years. But it's this new version of it where you have the text interface, the chat interface with it, right? Where kind of anybody can start to use it, and what it's able to sort of spit out and like turn into, turn into an image or turn into a song. I put in parentheses.
I think, as with anything, it's important people realize that they need to be in control of this technology.
Yes.
Which is something I feel uncomfortable about, the fact that generally that technology is not something that we run ourselves. Although there are actually ways of doing this, people don't really know this, but
it's generally
there are ways of running LLMs on your own computers or servers. So I think as time goes on, I think people will realize that, and I encourage anybody who's dipping their toes into it to experiment with it on those lines, especially people who are worried about the impacts of this, because I think once you've looked at it and seen the obvious limitations, you may not feel that fear as much.
Yeah, exactly. The one that I always think about is the one that can make music, because the general discourse is that it's like, oh, we're only so far away from this being able to replace songwriters or something. But by definition it's derivative.
Yeah.
Not that pop music isn't derivative, but I think that in general, I have two thoughts about it, where it's like, well, the only people who are eventually going to be able to use this on a not novelty way are people who are interested in making music anyway. So like, if the only people who are going to be using it are more or less musicians, and if you can roll out a version of this tool where you have a more granular level of control, then it sounds like an instrument to me. It sounds like you've built a new instrument, more or less.
Possibly, yeah. That could be one way that it transpires to be. I think there's no one way that people go about creating things. I like to personally engage with things on a deep level, and I'm not always really in the business of making commercial music, so I can't really comment on that as a sort of pop industry side of things. But in terms of what I do, occasionally I do use some. It wouldn't be artificial intelligence or machine learning, but I may use some tools or some element of something that I've built using some sort of code. That could be something I've been working a bit in what's called pure data recently, or that's related to something called Max MSP, some people may know about, but also writing my own programs to sort of just help me explore different permutations of things. But usually that phase for me, it's kind of it's just an exploratory phase, just to help me put things together.
Right.
I usually find making music for me, I have tried to make music where it is generative, and I'm aware there's a big tradition of this. I can't speak for all of it. I've never come away feeling 100% satisfied with my own efforts in that, because I found often in the creative process there's something completely, I don't want to say random, but some weird point where you've started working on something and then some kind of intuition takes over and takes it in a different direction. I don't think it's a random process, because then again, you could argue that if you were trying to make generative music, you could use pseudo-random generators to do that. And I think there is some level of intuition, and I can give an analogy to that. When I was young, I was in high school, and I was in the 3D art sculpture classes. I remember.
Oh yeah, I see. You've used Blender for your album covers.
Oh yeah, well spotted. Yeah. I remember doing some sculpture, and we'd been. Our teacher had taken us up to London to look at some great exhibitions of African and ancient Egyptian art. Mm-hmm. And I was working on this time on this sculpture. It was a head not dissimilar from the Nefertiti sculpture, if you know that one. And but my teacher kept saying to me, said, "Nick, your ideas are good, but they're a bit half-baked." And actually, that's a bit of advice that stuck with me all this time. I've always been, there's a little critical thing in my head thinking...
Sometimes that kind of comment can really stick with you.
And I didn't really understand what he was saying. At this time, I was starting to get into jazz and some pretty way out jazz at that time. I was in my early teens, but I still couldn't make the analogy with 3D art. And then he said something to me that helped me turn it in a different direction. He said this is great on its own, but you've just copied what was there already. I think what that needs is a headdress.
Okay.
And I remember previous to this, they'd taken us to another exhibition where we'd seen how artists had been using elements of nature, for example, the structures of trees and plants, to create sculptures that looked organic. And putting these two together, I had this concept for a sort of headdress that fitted on this sculpture that was sort of organic. And I think in a way, when you put the two together, it took the effect of this piece of art to somewhere completely different.
Right.
And that's something I've sort of held on to, that often I think I've done a piece of music or a composition or a performance or something, a recording, and I'm listening back to it and I think, well, this is good, but something about it is not quite getting to me. And then suddenly I think, yes, I'm going to take it and do something slightly unexpected, but still kind of using intuition. There's a link here. I can take this a few stages further in its evolution. And often it's surprising when the number of times I think I finished something and then I realize, oh wow, that was only the beginning.
Yeah. I find that can happen with composition a lot.
Exactly.
Where there's different phases of your level of satisfaction. Where once you can, write out 32 bars on a piece of paper, then you're like, there it is.
Yeah.
Right? But then you play it and you're like, well, okay, I think it needs a headdress.
This
right?
actually needs a 7-bar bridge or a 34-bar.
It needs, or just like maybe a little more depth in the way that it's played, right? Like you need to think about dynamics, or you need to think about texture, because those are really kind of the things that are where you can actually kind of like leave your mark.
Yeah.
Those texture. And that's actually kind of the thing that I find in my 30s, I've become a lot more fascinated with pop music than I was earlier. Because, in my teens, like getting into jazz and going to jazz school and like becoming a jazz musician, I was above that. I felt like I was better than pop music or something. And now I've developed this taste for it, only because like I feel like it is really just such a good like cultural barometer. Like it's a good way of like getting a snapshot of like what culture is like in that moment, right? Yeah. And pop music does it better than basically any other genre, and what I'm finding with pop music is that like texture is really like is really the thing right now. Coming up with a specific texture for how your music sounds, and I think that's actually kind of like what's ending up being the antithesis towards the AI thing. Because I find whenever I hear any of that AI music, it has this like inescapable texture. Like it all kind of sounds the same. because there's a thing that it can't get rid of.
The texture,
Yeah.
That dimension of it, the sort of immediate sort of perception of the music.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's like just something that it can't not do. And that happens a lot with LLMs.
Yeah.
There's, with the text, with ChatGPT, there's, you can, if you learn about these things, like, ChatGPT always it always talks about things in threes, right? Like where it'll be like, there's this, and then there's this, and then there's also this.
I've never actually used ChatGPT, but I've explored some of the models that are closely related in my own thing. That's interesting, and you've kind of hit upon an interesting thing here that might be something that might get explored by the next generation.
Right.
So if the currently if the emphasis is on texture, and as we know in art, things often come about in cycles, maybe the next phase, the sort of evolution away from this, or the reaction against this, will be form.
Form, yeah. I was going to say form too. And well, there has been maybe in the last like 10 years, one thing that's changed with form in pop music is a lot of pop songs have dropped bridges. They don't have bridges anymore.
Yeah.
And that bridges, I think, they're not gone, but for a while they were gone. Like they actually, it was just.
I had noticed that, but now you mention it, I'm just
verse,
thinking.
Chorus, chorus.
Yeah.
Song done, and then the song is 2 minutes and 15 seconds long, right? And there's probably a bunch of different reasons you can come up with for why that is, but I think it's mostly just a stylistic thing, and like the idea of like pumping up music as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
I think is mostly the reason. But yeah, I wonder if there's I think like taking away bridges. I'm not sure if that's necessarily enough of a change in form the way that you're talking about. I feel like it's just truncating songs for the radio so that it's not as long in between commercial breaks.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go back to the idea of the AABA song or the song with a bridge, even the pop song with a bridge, it would almost be like an essay whereby the bridge would give you the contrasting argument. And it would give a story maybe to the song. You could tell, you could come back to the A section, and that might be the lyrics might somehow summarize these two different points of view.
Yeah, what I find actually, if we're going to use that as an analogy, what I find is that they're doing now is sort of a synthesis where you have the you have a texture happening in the verse, and then a contrasting texture happening in the chorus.
Oh, I see.
And then maybe some elements from the chorus end up in the verse, or there's an even like more intense version of the verse texture followed by a more contrasting version of the chorus, and then it ends with a synthesis of the textures of both of those things.
I see, right. Yeah.
So I wish I had an example, but like that's something I've sort of unconsciously noticed about a lot of pop music. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good analogy, actually, if you think about it in essay format. And so, so like, how does form move away from there, where you have like, if you're thinking of it like an argument,
it's interesting because I can only speak for the analogies of form in maybe sort of Western. I don't want to use classical music, but there are a whole number of different ways.
Ternary pop music.
Yeah, which who knows where they might get
Sonata
explored.
form pop music.
Yeah, there's often a very sort of stream of consciousness form, or if you look at there are many more things to do with form in the way that
stream of consciousness form is what's happening in rap music.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because I saw this video recently about how rap music is different. Well, the way it's produced, except for a couple of people who are still doing it the old school way, where they're actually writing out their verses and thinking of it ahead of time. So like Kendrick Lamar is like one of those people who like writes out the entire thing and like memorizes it. And that's what makes him such a good performer, because like it's like this athletic thing that he's able to like, really like recite this thing that he wrote.
Yeah.
But the way that pop music is being, or rap music is being produced, is that you have a producer who has a beat, and you have a rapper who's in the booth, and they're listening to the beat, and they come up with lyrics in the moment, but then they just punch it all together.
Yeah.
So it's not like this, like quote unquote freestyle way of rapping where everything comes together in the moment. It's, over an hour or two.
Yeah, so a combination of the improvisation then being reassembled in the studio to create. Yeah. Yeah, that's there's definitely analogies to that in you can go in jazz. That's probably been happening the most. You look at Bitches Brew was probably
totally.
one of the examples where this really started being used.
Yeah,
and
you have a vamp and
yeah.
you have just a soloist. And
but then they assemble that to almost make. If you look at the way Farrah's dance works, it is almost a sonata form. They actually loop the first 5 minutes twice, or is it the first 2-3 minutes happen twice? Almost like I don't know if that's what Teo was thinking about there, but it's almost like in a Mozart sonata, you'd play the same bit. The first half of it would actually be repeated.
Oh wow! I didn't even realize that.
It creates a very different sort of perception of that composition as to perhaps if you've gone to hear them play that live, or it suddenly allows that opening section with the bass clarinet and Joe Zawinul to sort of stick in your head a bit more.
Yeah,
it reinforces that before Miles enters.
Man,
it's been a while since I've listened to that, but that's. I think there's no one way to make things, and often a thing I have done. Because I am much faster at improvising than meticulously writing things down on paper. Sometimes I sketch things out on paper to a certain extent, then I go and improvise variations on them, and then I'll take those improvisations and reorder them to find an order that I like, and that's how I might make an extended piece of composed music.
Oh wow!
So there's a bit of that, and it wouldn't be something I would definitely need the tools of some sort of recording system or DAW to do.
Yeah. So, you said, do you use Reaper?
Yeah,
that's your main.
I think so. Yeah, I haven't actually done much for a little while. I've been concentrating on other things, but I usually use Reaper, I think.
Yeah, there's I started playing around with Ableton a little bit like during the pandemic.
Yeah,
and they have that program has a. It basically will just sort of like record everything you're doing over a loop. So like you have a loop playing, and then it will just take a recording of anything that you can do that kind of thing where you're like coming up with different ideas that's happening over this loop.
That's right. Yeah, I've seen friends of mine have demonstrated that to me, and actually I have a friend who's building a programmatic interface into that to allow it to be controlled in many different ways. So it's there's a lot of creative possibilities in that.
Yeah, and that ends up being so useful, like just because you want to be, because like some of those really great ideas can only happen when you're in that state of improvisation, because you're allowing yourself to try things that you wouldn't necessarily be. What do I want to say? Like, I can be bolder when I'm improvising than I can when I'm composing.
Yeah,
there's more discipline associated with like traditional composition, but the boldness is kind of it's closer. Whenever I hear myself improvising on a recording or something, and I do something that you could consider bold, I'm like, oh well, that's really kind of like me being me there.
Yeah.
And so I want to be able to catch that and bottle that, right, for a composition, because a lot of the time I feel like, and it's not a bad thing, but when I'm composing music, I feel like I'm doing an impression of somebody else, right? I was like, well, what's something John Scofield would play over this, right? Second John Scofield mention of the episode so far. So is that a big part of your composition process? Is like implementing improvisation?
It has been lately, yeah. I've slowly sort of allowed myself to do that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's also sort of changing the way I might, if I have to notate stuff, it changes the way I end up physically notating things. And interesting, I'll just go back in time. At the university, I ended up doing my first master's in composition. So,
20 years.
Actually, a little bit longer than that. That was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
You emailed me saying it's been 20 years.
I don't mention this because I didn't. I just scraped a pass on my I didn't feel I was. I fell out with that kind of composition for a little while, and I've come back to it, and I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. Having had 25 years of playing jazz and improvised music, and I think a thing I'm noticing is that the way I would choose to notate things would be very different from the way I would actually notate things very simply now, and allow people a lot of, where possible, a lot of freedom to sculpt the rhythms.
Right.
And often I see a lot of contemporary classical music where it almost feels like people are trying to notate rubato, and I'm not entirely sure if that. I wonder if that's part of me, and I wouldn't be writing for these people because I don't exist in those circles. So I'm writing primarily for myself and people I know. So I would rather work with people who are stronger improvisers.
Yes.
And write things that are simpler and give them more space to more flexibility.
So you're using their intuition as a compositional tool.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find ways to allow people to break off and to improvise at the right time, without people necessarily having to. I mean, I know there's been various approaches to this. Anthony Braxton maybe is one of them. I don't only know the surface of Anthony's music. That's one way people have tried to do that. He often writes things that are scores and then allows people to actually move from one position and score to a place in a completely different composition, like a portal into another piece of music, which can be quite interesting. But I think there's different ways you can do it, and there's different ways to explore it, and it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, the aesthetic has to be completely within the realms of experimental music. But I'm just enjoying finding that, and like you're saying, I'm trying to find. Often when I'm improvising things, I find ideas that have more personal connection than if I was trying to write them down. Yeah, writing things down. Yeah, I do. And generally, as a musician, I have a tendency, or I have had a tendency, to be a good mimic.
Right.
I've come away feeling a little dissatisfied with myself sometimes when I'm doing that. I think, well, maybe it's a good exercise for my ears, but.
Well, it's funny because I think you're holding yourself to that standard, and you know what you're supposedly mimicking, but the listener doesn't necessarily realize that.
Yeah.
And even the musicians that are playing with you won't necessarily realize that, right? Yeah. And I think in a way, there's either conscious mimicry or unconscious mimicry too.
Yeah.
Where,
I realized something interesting the other day, and I was watching some old British comedy shows. We tend to involve a lot of imitation of rapid imitation of different accents, and I'm thinking of some of these, British sketch comedy shows like Monty Python, some Michael Palin things,
Fry and Laurie.
Yeah. So there's often a lot of characters playing different accents, different parts. Yeah. And it's something I often do when I'm joking with people. I put on different accents, different British accents, because that's quite normal. I think that may have somehow, looking at my music, I find often I've been doing these little things where I'm finding myself under the influence of somebody temporarily, and then immediately playing a different role in a different situation. I think we all do that to some extent.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what I've tried to do, because I've come away from the whole process feeling, well, I never really have a voice, but maybe I think there might be a thing where your voice is actually how you have these different characters interacting in the space of one piece of music.
Absolutely. It's the amalgamation.
All these things come in a little phrase,
of course.
Gives you one thing, then another phrase comes along. And I think maybe in this sort of age, maybe that's how we will find our voices, because we have so many influences
and
we love.
Your ability to, because that's what comes to mind. Yeah. Right? If you're in conversation with somebody and you're making a joke and you put on a Scouse accent or something, that's just what comes to mind, and it's going to be funnier and more poignant the better your accent is, probably, right?
Exactly.
And so it's probably going to be the same thing with music, where you're able to hone in on that specific idea that comes to mind in that moment, and the more accurately you can do that, the better you are at arguing your point. And it's not that you're ripping someone off, like you're speaking in their accent, right? That's a little bit different. Although also you're probably, if you're speaking in an accent, you're probably saying a phrase that would be said in that accent. Or,
exactly. Yeah.
Because I know what that's like too. I mean, like it's a little more subtle here in Canada because we don't have as long of a history of regional accents, but there still are in Canada. The way people speak in Alberta.
I remember this a lot at school. I was always picked on for having this kind of accent, no matter where I was at school.
Really?
It was always, people do very much judge you by your accent, and so I feel I'm often. I find I talk differently to different people.
Interesting. Well, yeah. I mean, you get back to where you're from, and then you have the way that you speak to them. Code switching, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
But, I think that's just going to be the your influence is coming through. Those are always going to be present, and. I mean, what are you expected to do? To cleverly mask them, right? Like you have these influences that live inside of you that are responsible for.
I think they can all work together to make something. I think rather than somebody may have a voice, and once in a while once every generation you get the great geniuses, the people who radically change the whole underlying language of the music somehow. But then you get the people who are the amalgamations who bring things together. Yeah. And often the art of how these things are brought together in the longer run is the thing that really interests me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, that kind of reminds me, this sounds a little heavy, but like, I think as a musician who is concerned about whether or not they have a voice, so to speak, you're already there. You're already trying to have a voice. There's so many musicians, probably most musicians, who actually aren't interested in having their own voice. They're interested in playing in a specific style and being able to do it in that way. And maybe they can develop a specific way that they play in that style that's recognizable. But I think that this is like an improvised music. It's something that we're very precious about, is this idea of having a voice. Yeah. But, it reminds me of when people are about to become parents, and maybe they had a rough childhood or something, and they're concerned about whether or not they're able to, close the cycle of abuse or something like that. And it's like, well, if you're already concerned about that before you've had a child, chances are you're already there. You're already going to do great. And so I think in the same way, like, having that concern already means that you're cognizant of this idea of having a voice. You yearn for it, you're concerned for it, which means that it's probably there.
Yeah, I suppose so. And one thing I think a lot about is this is independent of style. Yeah. And this is a mistake that's often made. People think somebody's voice is the style there, but I find some situations I play with people who have slightly different stylistic boundaries, but there's enough freedom given that I can do something personal within that, and it's not a stylistic thing. It's not a choice of language or notes. It's just the way things come together. Yeah. Often over the course of a whole gig, The most successful
Absolutely.
relationships I've had are where that happens.
Yeah, like the choices that you can make, entrances and pauses and everything. Those are all really what kind of make it. I like that, where like it doesn't have to be a line. It doesn't have to be the way that you're playing the melody or whatever.
Yeah.
It can be how you're presenting the entire thing.
Yeah.
Because that's valid too. Like the set, the set really makes it, what you decide to play first and last. Like those things are.
That's another choice
you're curating.
That's part of your personality. And
it's an artistic expression. It's funny like how that can affect your enjoyment of a show if you're watching it, where it's just like, well, that was a choice, or it's like, oh, I love how they did this and then this and then like, you can set yourself up in a way too, right? Where, you can play how you play in one permutation versus the next permutation also, right?
Yeah.
I keep thinking about this one recording I listened to recently when I was teaching a student. He had brought Softly as a Morning Sunrise. And so we were talking about the tune, and he brought me like these very like real book changes. And I was like, you know what? I feel like they don't actually play the bridge that way.
Yeah.
With the diminished chords. Not to get too granular here, but I was like, I feel like those are actually like most of the time they play it as like 2/5. And so like we looked up some versions, and to bring up McCoy again, I found this Coltrane quartet live at the Village Vanguard, and they play Softly, and it starts out as piano trio. And it's like 62, so like pretty early McCoy still. And it starts out as piano trio, and it sounds like, it's McCoy, but it's early McCoy, so it sounds like Bill Evans and Oscar Peterson, and like it's very tight, and very understated, and like he'll bring out a flourish here and there, but it's just like, it has like that nice like early McCoy trio kind of thing. And it's very pleasant, and and then halfway through the record, and so I'm like listening to this, I hadn't heard it before, and I'm just like sitting there with my student. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is like Coltrane's taking a break for this track or something. And then halfway through the recording, Coltrane comes in on soprano, and the band just opens up. Just everything that the band is doing, it changes. It just changes from trio to quartet in that moment, and it just melted my brain listening to that. And I couldn't keep my, teacherly composure. Where I'm like trying to show the student something, and I'm just like, whoa.
Well, that's a good thing, because I think often they I remember seeing as a student, I enjoyed seeing the enthusiasm that my teachers were having for discovering new things and for what they were doing in general.
But it's and that kind of thing, you develop this new appreciation for what that band was doing, because they have that level of like when they're playing trio, they're playing in that more traditional trio way, and then when Coltrane comes in doing his thing on the soprano, it's like you have no choice. Like Elvin has to go to the cymbal, and just everything becomes long. Everyone's playing long tones and or more percussively or something, right? It just feels like it goes from mono to stereo kind of thing, right?
Some of the music, going back to what we were saying about being able to go many ways with the same.
Yeah.
Some of the music I'm actually in town to play tonight with my friend Len Aruliah. His music is very, very influenced by Kenny Wheeler, of whom he was a friend of. And an interesting thing about Kenny's music is that although it appears complex on the surface, the tradition of all of Kenny's bands was that there were people approaching the music in radically different ways.
Right.
You'd have somebody like Stan Saltzman on it, who has a very, a huge range of harmonic and melodic resources, but he's gluing things together in a very unique way.
Right.
Then you've got Evan Parker, who's playing almost free at times over these changes, or playing completely free. And then you've got people who were, swing players, or from the sort of swing British bebop tradition. So all these things coming together over the same music to make tell very different stories in a way that it's a kind of extension of what we were talking about earlier, but on a sort of meta level.
Yeah.
The whole band is actually a combination of different stories coming together to create a sort of a voice out of all these disparate approaches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing that Kenny was able to do. It's almost like Kenny attracted people to play his music. It was it was like being able to play his music was sort of mecca.
And also, I was actually reading the Nick Smart biography of this. Somebody lent me his biography of Kenny. So I reread that over the summer, and I went back to check out some of the music I didn't know too well. And the thing that struck me is just how good a trumpet player he was.
Oh, yeah.
I actually checked out some of the early Braxton stuff, and my God, my jaw fell on the floor halfway through Kenny's solo. It was technically and in terms of imagination astounding. And there was no debate at the time. Even Freddie Hubbard and a few other great American trumpet players were saying, you should check out that British guy, Kenny. Yeah. He's scary.
Yeah.
Even Winton knew him early on, and Winton was saying, "Oh yeah, he's a bad cat. He can really play some good trumpet." So yeah, that's the other side of it as well.
It's funny. I grew up in the jazz scene, with Kenny Wheeler, being sort of this. I think he has this connection to Vancouver.
I think I know a few people of the older generation who played with him. I talked to Ken Lister now and again, and Ken
Hugh
says,
Fraser.
So he played a gig with Kenny down at the Alma Street Cafe, which is now I think a coffee shop near where I used to live, and I thought, wow. Yeah. And he did a lot of teaching at Banff for a long time.
Yes,
so
that's
lots
right.
of musicians related to Hugh Fraser.
Yeah,
came into contact with him, including Len. So that's how Len's connection started.
Okay, yeah. And. But I feel like there was always just sort of this presence of Kenny Wheeler, because everybody saw him. Well, he's also he's Canadian, right? Yeah. But was he as big of a figure in the UK growing up too, or?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. I would say an increasingly prominent figure. I think by the time, I believe at the beginning, I don't know too much about this, but I know that maybe that music wasn't as well received by critics, but definitely by the time my generation were coming on the scene, he was somebody we very much looked up to.
Yeah,
and also the pianist John Taylor, who
you studied with John.
And together those two created some absolutely astounding music, especially in the trio Azimuth, which changed my life when I heard it. It changed my whole approach to making music. That's been a huge influence on me.
Yeah, talk about a guy who understands texture. Yeah. And did you study with John Taylor at Guildhall?
That's right, yeah.
What was the teaching style like there?
Well, in general, actually, the overriding thing I came away with from that was that we were being taught to self-teach. We were being taught the process of creative self-teaching. Now, that's largely due to Simon Purcell, who managed the course at that time.
Okay.
He'd actually done teacher training early on in his life, so he was quite seriously thinking about how do you effectively create and creatively explore a lifetime of improvisation. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for Pete Churchill, who's actually another Canadian. I'm not sure if he was born here or if his family were Canadian, but he's a great conductor, composer, arranger, really, really super nice guy. And Scott Stroman, who was another conductor, composer who gave me a lot of arranging advice at the time. So together that all came together, and I think the overriding thing, they were trying to set us up in a way to learn the process of creative exploration, creative self-teaching. And if I was to wrap this up, I know we touched on AI earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And why that grates with me, at least the way that AI is being forced upon people now.
Yeah.
The way that grates upon me is because I was taught to work with materials and learn things in a way that involved a sort of deep connection.
Yeah.
And I came away with that, and those principles, even though I don't practice like I did, I rarely have time to practice these days.
Right.
But when I do engage with things for a short period of time, it's very deep, and I get very deep into things. And I like we talked a little bit earlier about how when I'm thinking about something and it might be half-baked and I want to find where I can take it further.
Yeah.
All that started coming together in many ways in my life. Later on, I got back into computers quite seriously. I actually went and did a master's in computer science. But I remember applying those principles from how I learnt to play really difficult jazz tunes by learning the basics of computer science. The same creative processes helped me achieve some level of mastery in that as well. And I think it will continue. I don't know what I'm going to do next in my life. I mean, I hope I'll keep making music as long as I can. But whatever I do next, I hope I'll apply some of those teachings. And I'll be able to. I'll have a situation where I can help, where I can continue to do that, and where I can continue to help others to try and grasp that sense of deep learning.
Yeah. I think there's something about like control and having an understanding of process. And that, I think, also is the thing that bothers me about AI in general, is that it removes the user from any sense of process, where you can make a request and then you have an output and that's it.
Yeah.
And so there's no understanding of how process works. There's no understanding of what is going into, and I mean, like, that's also like how, like, this deep learning stuff is anyway, where, like, there's a certain point of it where, like, we actually don't understand how it's, like, making some of these connections.
Yes, it's an emergent process. I don't believe we really understand why some of this comes together. Well, I can explain neural networks on a sort of very surface level, but this is an emergent process by multiple layers of weighted networks, and it's something that honestly we can't rationalize about. We can't really explain. We can't write a set of formula to really explain what's going on, other than we know that if we put these things in, we get something in that sort of comes out, after a lot of training, that maybe does what we want it to do, or maybe not.
Close enough, basically. There's something strangely almost mystical about it, where it's like...
I think there's the saying, was it Arthur C. Clarke? He said, any new technology is indistinguishable from magic. So, you've just got to bear that in mind with the things you see in the world around you. It may be magic now, but maybe one day we will understand it, and I think we will see the limitations of it.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is deeply missing is people will deeply crave human connections in a Stack Overflow. So a Stack Overflow is a question and answer site that's very popular amongst technical people. Right. And in last year's anonymous survey, I think something like 70% of programmers said that they were dissatisfied with the tools they were being forced to use a lot of the time.
Yes.
And this is an interesting thing.
It's a big problem
What
right now.
do we value? Communication. These question and answer sites, the good ones, they are a discussion. Because there's not always a right or wrong answer. There's a discussion. Well, this is one way you could do it, but if your situation is like this, you might find this is more optimal for what you're doing. And I think thinking about these things as much more sort of, these interactions between people are much more valuable. And the same would apply to music, obviously.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the creative process.
Man, this was such a great conversation. I think you're such a fascinating person.
It's a pleasure to hang out again.
I know, it's great to see you. I feel like we see each other once a year these days, but I don't know. I always have a great time talking to you. So I hope we can have a part 2 sometime soon. Yeah. Don't have to be confined to the VPL Central branch hours of operation on a Sunday. But thanks, Nick. Thanks so much. Have a great show tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Thanks again to Nick for making the time to speak with me. Maybe I'll go out to the island to visit him and have another episode, because I feel like it it was just great to catch up and pick his brain about all sorts of stuff. You can find Nick's work online at literally nickpeck.com. He got nickpeck.com. I guess he was in early. If you want to find out about when he's in town to play, which happens a few times a year, as always, make sure to head over to rhythmchanges.ca. Sign up for the free weekly newsletter. Get in the know about things going on in the Vancouver jazz scene. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.